Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the class. As you can see, I'm half as capable as usual. Rabbi is here today. He was called on a family emergency. It was a health thing. She's fine, but he needed to stay in Chicago for another day. He'll be back tomorrow. So we're a little bit out of shape, out of order. We did the story of what last time? The binding of Isaac, which was one of the crucial stories. After that, so the characters are Abraham, Sarah, his wife. They finally have their son Isaac. They had trouble having a baby in their old age, and so Abraham got with his Egyptian maid, Hagar, and they had a kid. And then, generally speaking, this is for all husbands, your wife will not like your girlfriend. That's just a rule that's always been there. So she kicked them out, Hagar and her son. What's her son's name? Ishmael. Ishmael, in tradition, is the father, the ancestor of what group of people? Muslims. Isaac becomes the father, Abraham, I guess, all the way back with Jews. So from the very beginning, there was this enmity. Interestingly enough, this story could be used for a claim to the land that is now known as Israel. This is part of the patrimony, part of the heritage that they will look to. See, we've always been there. The other group are the outsiders. We are the original settlers, so to speak. So that's there. Pay attention to that. And then Hagar, Ishmael go off, and Sarah dies. We didn't actually cover that. Sarah dies, so the matriarch has passed on. And does anybody know, what does Abraham do? Does he spend 7 years in mourning? Not so much. He goes and buys a cave in the land of, where is he? Canaan. Canaan is a general area. It means, it's kind of like saying in the Mon Valley, like all those towns and down in that spot. Canaan, and what we're talking about, is Israel, Jordan, basically all of modern Israel and a little bit of areas right around that. That is Abraham from that area? No. He's from farther east, probably Babylon, and he comes there. This is, he believes, part of the promise where God has led them. So he wants to have Sarah buried in the new land. That's the promised land. This is where the future is going to be. So he gets a bunch, remember Abraham's loaded with money, and that shekels of silver and gold, camels and slaves and cattle and so on, and takes a bunch of it and buys this cave. And this will be our family burial plot. That place, by the way, still exists, interestingly enough. And it is venerated by Jews and Muslims. It was taken over back and forth, over and over, all throughout history. It was Jewish, and then it was Muslim and Jewish and Muslim, and they literally split it into half Jewish, half Muslim. Jews couldn't go there for a long time. And now it's under Israel's rule, occupation, and shared, which is by and large a good thing. It's the second holiest site within Judaism, is this cave of the matriarchs and patriarchs. And who all is buried there? It's about 25 miles, by the way, from Jerusalem south. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Rebekah, and Leah. All of them. So the all-star team, the ring of honor, all the things you'd want to say, this is all the superstars, matriarchs and patriarchs, this is the spot where they go. So if you're a Jew, or if you're a Muslim, this is your ancestral cave, burial spot, sepulcher. There was a church built on it, which was converted to a mosque, and so on and so forth. But everybody wants a piece of this very important place. Sarah, by the way, was how old when she died? If you're on Jeopardy, you'll thank me. 127 years old. What'd you say? Dear God. He said, dear God. 127 years old. So she's buried in this place that's the land of promise. and the story just ends. There's no transition. That's the previous chapter 23. And chapter 24, which you have here in this great image that Ken put on there, is a very long, relative to the other ones, very long chapter. I want to go over some, give you some context, and then we'll read through it, pulling out certain things. Some of them are just completely beyond our cultural norms, and some of it is, oh yeah, I totally understand what's going on there. So this is chapter 24. The next chapter is the death of Abraham. So you get Sarah in 23 dies, the death of the matriarch, then we find a wife for the heir, and the next one is the patriarch dies. So there's a nice little order to all this. So let me ask, how is the promise of Abraham passed to the next generation? That's a bird's eye view level of what's going on. How do you pass on the faith, the tradition, the beliefs from one generation to another? How do we do that in church or within Judaism? Storytelling. So that's part of what is functioning here. You have sacred places, hence the cave and the well and so on and so forth. Sacred people, perhaps, but it's primarily storytelling through people and objects. And so that's what part of this is. You pass on the faith. But within this particular tradition, a person is really, really important, because the story of God connected to the people is through particular people, not just anybody. Abraham got this promise to go from your land and your people and go to this new land that I promise you, and it'll have all these wonderful things in it, and there you'll go. And he sets off. And so the heir, that line, is really, really important. To Americans, that's not that big of a deal to us. But I'll have a couple comparisons later for us to consider. Why is it so important for Isaac, the son, to have a wife? Because that's how the promise operates. I mean, it's obvious when you think about it. God said he would do it through Abraham's line, and so Isaac is the line. And if my wife just died, and I'm a really old man, and I got lots of camels and stuff to show for it, I'm not so sure, this is a judgment much later, how much did Abraham and Sarah love each other as husband and wife? Twice he said, that's my sister. Remember that? Put himself before her. You're going to sacrifice her son and kill him on an altar? How did that conversation go between husband and wife? You're going to kill my son? I mean, not well. We got a psychologist, psychiatrist. What would that how would that work out in the family dynamics? Then he's got a child by another woman. So, is he A quality husband material? He's a provider, but not much else. Oh, and by the way, the promises of God come through him. So those are two big positives, but the rest of it is not so good. And so that ends, and there's this beautiful piece at the end of the story. Something's completely different with Isaac's life. Oftentimes, our family of origin, we want to be just like that or rebel, feel repulsed by that. And if your father was going to sacrifice you, and remember, most of us have in the image, I know all of you weren't here. How old was Isaac at this is called the binding of Isaac, when Abraham takes him up the hill and to sacrifice him, and there's a ram appears? How old was he? 10 is a little boy. He was actually a full-on adult, at least 37. That's the Jewish tradition. Exactly. Everybody does, but that's not what the story says. The images we have are of a little boy. Because remember, Abraham's old. I'm 52. I could overpower a 10-year-old. I'm not so sure I could overpower a 37-year-old who doesn't want me to kill him. I mean, I have to be clever and sly about what's happening there. This is old, Abraham is old, 100 plus. And a 10-year-old, no problem, but a 37-year-old, there's a conversation happening. So all these dynamics are there. And that's like, I don't want to be like my father. I think I will have a different type of life in there. So why is it important, Charles?
If he's 37, why does he go along up on the mountain?
That's what we talked about before. If he's 37, why does he go along with the plan? What'd you say, Jess? He's a grown man. However, the 37 is a traditional number if you calculate dates of Abraham and Sarah. He's old enough to know what he's doing. He's old enough to do something about it. But he has agency in that. And so he goes along with that. Is this God's will? He's willing to sacrifice himself, basically, which is a fascinating idea. What's that? Because God said so. I would need really clear multiple confirmations of that. Trust but verify, wasn't that a thing? But I want to be really clear that this is what God wants. Like, write it on the sky. How about this happen? So, Jeffrey, he went along with it for whatever reason. That's what we know from the story.
Another thing that we may not know from the story, but he is actually being obedient.
Isaac is being obedient to God or his father or both. And maybe he sees this as part of the plan. Who carries the lineage? That's the crazy question that you have to ask. The binding of Isaac is, that's traditionally what it's called, has had more written about it than just about any other story, because it has all these, you go with psychological directions, theological directions. If the promise is through Abraham and then through Isaac, if Isaac's killed, what happens to the promise of God? That's the risk in faith, is the traditional answer. I don't know if you buy that, but that's the traditional answer. So he's 37. I know, mind blown with that. Why, in the story, which we still haven't quite gotten to, why is it important where a wife is found? This is not get on a dating site or go to the club or, hey, have you seen the girl neighbor down the street type of thing. The family chooses the wife. The families choose each other, basically. Where does Abraham, send his servant to find a wife? Down the way? Local girl? Absolutely not. Go back to our family, which is a little weird. So he's supposed to marry a relative? Yes. Why? Why would he have to marry a relative? There are at least two important reasons for that. Trust, sure, that could be one.
Lineage. All the Jewish families to this day married each other. All the Rothschilds married each other.
Because they are believers. They have the right theology, the right understanding of the world. The Canaanites, the locals, those are not great people. And the story later on the story is like you can see why. We don't want to associate with those people, so you need to go back. Other thing is pure bloodlines. Sounds, you're mentioning the Rothschilds. Well, royalty did that forever in Europe, didn't they? It's the same idea. We do that now with dogs, and you want a pure bloodline, so you have to match certain things to one another. That's basically what's happening here, Jeffrey.
It keeps possessions and all kinds of other things in one.
And it keeps possessions or titles or whatever connected to one another. So in the story, he tells his servant, go to the land where we're from, find a bride. Why does he not send Isaac? There's a question. He sends his servant to go find. That's a lot of trust right there, by the way. He's in charge of all his money, and go find a wife for my son. And don't come back till you do. Because they could keep Isaac. Isaac could never come back, and he's supposed to be in the promised land. So he trusts his servant more than his son. Perhaps, that's how I read it. I trust my servant to go and bring a wife back, not to send Isaac, because he might just stay. And for the promise to be operative, it's got to be in the promised land. So all these things are happening there. I find all this stuff fascinating. Sandra.
Well, I guess I had no understanding of what could happen if you married your cousin, or if you married your sister.
Say that again.
I guess they had no understanding of marrying in a family. For example, marrying your sister, marrying your cousin. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah, because we know today that causes problems.
I don't know the scientific answer to that, but my guess is if royalty throughout the time knew, like hemophilia or different things, probably they would have figured that out in time if they didn't already know. But certain things are more important than that. Having a pure bloodline, for example, right connection. But it's a great point. So this whole chapter is divided into 4 scenes. Abraham and his unnamed servant, traditionally that's known as Eliezer of Damascus. He appears elsewhere in Genesis as the guy in charge of all my stuff, all of Abram's stuff. Then the second scene is the servant and Rebekah. Then there's the servant and Rebekah's family, which is really funny. We'll get to that. The humor is, we clearly see God's hand in all this stuff that our daughter, or sister in this case, is supposed to go back and get married to you. And why are they able to see that? Because he's saying, here, take all this gold and all this jewelry and all these camels and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's God's hand in it 100%. This is for me. She gets the thing. Great. We're all good. And then fourthly is Isaac and Rebekah, which is short. The first and fourth scenes, Abraham and the servant and Isaac and Rebekah, announce the problem. He needs a wife. The promise has to continue and has to go this way, and there's a solution. The drama part is in the 2 middle scenes, of like finding the wife and trying to figure that out. So let's read a little bit. Now Abraham was old, well advanced in years. And when the Bible says well advanced, like that means really old. And the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. There is an idea, which I will get to a few times, prosperity, as in material prosperity, is a sign of God's blessing, at least in a certain section of Jewish literature. It is clearly a sign, and you could say, in the Protestant work ethic, how do you know you've been blessed? Because look at the material advantages I have. That was an argument made here as well as much later. So Abraham has been blessed in many things, all things. Abraham said to his servant Eliezer, the oldest of his house, who had charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you will not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites. Do not go to those gross, awful, no good, terrible people, the Canaanites, even though we live there. We got walls to keep those people away, among whom I live, but will go to my country, to my kindred, and get a wife for my son Isaac. What the heck is putting your hand under your thigh? It's worse than you think, Charles. Thigh is a euphemism for groin. And so it's better just to explain it. Not just in that culture, but apparently at that time in that area. If you sign, monkeys do this, by the way, so I have read. I learned a lot preparing for some of this. Monkeys, to show if you're not in the same bloodline, because obviously a sibling should show affection and so on and support and protection, but to have mutual vulnerability is how we might describe that. So supposedly a monkey will sit there and one male will hold the genitals of another male, and I've got you. And any moment, a chimpanzee is strong enough to just tear them off and cut, that would be devastating in many ways. And so it's not like a long thing. You don't just hang out all day doing this, but hey, think of something. Stand up if you would, Jeffrey. You signed up for this when you became a deacon. Rather than that, look what we do. How about trust? So I have no weapon in my hand. I am greeting you. I am open. And so hand under my thigh means to hold my genitals. And what else? Why would that be symbolic, significant? The spot from which Isaac came. The idea of the future, the lineage, all those things. So there's all this stuff, a way of swearing an oath. You will do this, right? Yes, I'll do it. Gotcha. Exactly what you said. So, put your hand under my thigh, and I'll make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you'll get a wife for my son, not from the Canaanites. So, oath. This guy's his servant, slave, who clearly has charge of all his stuff and can go out and do stuff. He could leave if he wanted to, but there is clearly a close bond there. So Eliezer, the servant, said to him, "Perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which you came?" Probably that's in there to give us another clue. No, he can't go there. He absolutely can't stay there. He's supposed to be in the promised land. Abraham said to him, "See to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land." So if you're a Jew today and you read this, it is very easy to see, look, that's where our people have been from since the very beginning. He, God, will send his angel before you. You, Eliezer, shall take a wife for my son there. So you got to go over there, an angel will help you. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you're free of this oath. Now the guy could just say, "Sorry, she wasn't willing to follow me," and take all that money and just leave, but he doesn't do that. "Only you must not take my son back there." So he's risking all of his money, the future, on what the servant will do. And don't take Isaac there. Bring her back, and then if not, you're free. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master and swore to him concerning this matter. End of scene. Any comments on that? How is Abraham portrayed in this? It doesn't seem like the same guy who just said, "That's my sister," twice, or offered up his son, or he seems pretty clear-headed to me.
How does he find out that these people are related? That he's in the line, that the woman is in the line?
Oh, well, his family's from there.
Is he the 12th cousin once removed or something?
Not that far, but yeah, these are my ancestral people. Like wherever you're from, I have family, it would be more of the American context. Go back to Kentucky where my both sets of grandparents were that type of thing. So that's from among our people. That's how we would probably express that. There's something really bad. That stupid person went out on her own, and you know there are bad guys out there, and she's going to fall because she looked backwards, and there's always a twig or a root where you do that. Do I need to tell you what else is going to happen? The bad guy is going to get her or try, and she narrowly escapes. It's a thing that immediately tells you what's about to occur. Meeting at a well is the same type of thing in that type of Jewish literature. So the cover, in fact. It's not the well, but it's a well. What other people meet? What is a well? Obviously, this is for people and animals, by the way. What happens there? It's the community Starbucks. It is the place where you go get water, and in a desert-like community, or mostly desert, that's the place where everybody is going to go. And all different types of people meet and interact at the well, unlike a lot of other places where you stay within your group. Everybody has to go there, so there's a mingling that occurs. Interestingly, where did I have the notes on that? Me and Aaron Bisno brought this up. It's a stock type scene to let the hearers know what is happening. Abraham's servant stopped at the well and met Rebekah there. Jacob, the son of Isaac, met Rachel at a well when she went to water the flock. Moses met his future wife, Zipporah, at a well. Saul, from 1 Samuel, met young women who were on the way to draw water while he was searching for his father's donkeys. Hagar, the girlfriend, Egyptian slave of Abraham and Sarah, fled from Sarah and met an angel at a well when her son's about to die and have some water. And then Jesus met who at a well? Samaritan woman. Sir, give me this water, you live forever type of thing. I have a really interesting sermon that I've now figured out because of this story. You go to meet your wife at the well, and so Jesus meeting the Samaritan woman, different group, different tribe. It's supposed to be a marriage, but it's what happens is a spiritual type marriage, interestingly enough. Never even heard that before. But knowing from the well part, all those things you would automatically know if you were just reading this. So, he goes to the well. Of course, that's where you'd go to find a wife for your boss's son. It was towards evening, the time when women go out to draw water. So he didn't go at any time. He went at the right time. Happy hour is when he showed up there. And he said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. The term steadfast love in Hebrew is hesed, which is steadfast faith, fidelity, love. It's the Greek equivalent would be agape, or like agape, our newsletter, the unconditional love that comes only from God, that we try to participate in. So that's the show me the real love that only you have to give. That's what I'm looking for. He's kind of telling God what's happening for the sake of all of us. I'm standing here by the spring of water, and the daughters of the townspeople are coming out to draw water. Let the girl to whom I shall say, please offer your jar that I may drink, and who shall say, drink and I will water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown this hesed, steadfast love to my master. How does that strike you as a prayer? God, here's how I want you to operate so I can complete my task on these really specific terms. Not in one day only, right now. The next person I see is going to win the lottery. It's like, whoa, that's how it feels to me. But, it's a story.
It's also asking for a blessing.
It's also asking for a blessing. He's trying to be faithful in his own way. And this is a beautiful one. Before he had finished speaking, his prayers answered. That worked. That was awesome. There was Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, coming out with her water jar at her shoulder. The girl was very fair to look upon. She had a great personality. No, she was hot. That's the first thing he noticed about her. And what was a virgin whom no man had known. How would he know that? Does she have a big V on her? No. That's just part of the story to show she's suitable, she's fit. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, please let me sip a little water from your jar. And she said, drink, my lord. She said, and quickly lowered her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. When she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw for your camels also until they have finished drinking. How many camels were there? 10. That's a lot of water. I assume if they drink, their desert riding things, and a horse I know drinks a lot of water, that's a lot of, it almost, it's not a self-fulfilling prophecy, but if he says, let the one who offers me something to drink be the one, hey, can I have a sip of water? Like, that seems very directive there. She quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran again to the well to draw water, and she drew for all his camels. The man gazed at her in silence, a little creepy, to learn whether or not the Lord had made his journey successful. He's discerning, is this the right one, after all? When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold nose ring weighing a half shekel and 2 bracelets for her arms weighing 10 gold shekels. So the next time you see somebody wearing a nose ring, tell them how biblical they are. I guarantee they will love that. And 2 bracelets for her arms weighing 10 gold shekels, and said, tell me whose daughter you are. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? She said to him, I am the daughter of Bethuel's son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. She added, we have plenty of straw and fodder and a place to spend the night. So she's from the right family. That's what was just communicated. Oh, big clue. She's beautiful, and she's in the right spot, and she's from the right family. I might be on to something here. And hospitable. She's nice. She's friendly. She's strong. She's a good worker. Yeah. The man bowed his head and worshiped the Lord and said, blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, and worshiped the Lord and said, blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love, hesed, and his faithfulness. You notice it begins and ends with a blessing there, part of the story. Then the girl, Rebekah, ran and told her mother's household about these things. Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. He's not the father, he's the brother, but he's the guy who, like the man of the house, so to speak. He's in charge of everything, roughly equivalent to Eliezer, who's making the decisions for the family here. And Laban ran out to the man. So notice it's quickly they want to meet him, to the spring. As soon as he had seen the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms, did you catch that? As soon as he saw the big flashy bling of gold all over her, and when he heard the words of his sister Rebekah, thus the man spoke to me, he went to the man, and there he was, standing by his camels, his Mercedes and BMWs and so on, at the spring. He said, come in to my house, really rich guy, stranger, and stay for a while. Why do you stand outside when I prepared the house and a place for the camels? So the man came into the house, and Laban unloaded the camels, gave him straw and fodder, water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him, so he has an entourage with him. Then food was set before him to eat, but he said, I will not eat till I've told you my errand. And he said, speak on, get to the good part where there's money and stuff involved. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, has become wealthy. So imagine this dude shows up at your house, given gifts of gold, and then he's saying, and my master's here's all his holdings, all his assets going on. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when she was old, and given him all that he has. My master made me swear, you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites. Go to my father's house. Perhaps this woman will not follow me, and so on and so on. I came today to the spring and said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, if you will now only make successful the way I'm going, I'm standing here by the spring of water. Let the young woman who comes out to draw, to whom I shall say, please give me a little water from your jar to drink. And he will say, drink, and I will draw water for your camels also. Let her be the one. Why is it so repetitive, the story?
Make the point.
To make the point, and that's what we were talking about before. This wasn't written down for a long time. It was an oral tradition. And so it's structured in a way that the pieces keep, oh, right, that's almost like the chorus of the song, that he's retelling the story so you really get it, and it reinforces that idea. Before I finished speaking in my heart, there was Rebekah, the fulfillment of this promise, the fulfillment of what we had asked, coming out with her water jar on the shoulder. And she went down to the spring, and I drew, and so on. Whose daughter are you? I'm skipping ahead just because we don't have time. Now then, if you will deal loyally and truthfully with my master, tell me, and if not, tell me so that I may turn either to the left or the right. Is this the right one, or should I do something else, anything else? Then Laban and Bethuel answered, this thing comes from the Lord. Clearly this is God's doing. We cannot speak to you anything bad or good. Look, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. So, here's the question. Did the brother discern God's will in this story, or was he really impressed by all the gold and camels and stuff? Or both? This prosperity thing is a sign of God's blessing. That's how they think. And so clearly this guy's rich, so he must be blessed by God. And I don't have to feed my sister anymore. And she just got us a whole bunch of camels and stuff. This is great. Hey, we got some more girls in the back if you need that. No comments? Charles?
How did you get the nose ring on so quickly?
I don't know.
Seems like another little problem. It must have taken a long time to get all that water from the camel.
I think so.
A lot of trips back and forth. And
10 trips, maybe? I don't know.
at least, and then there's other people there too. So it wasn't just her well, it was the communal well.
Right.
A lot of women had.
When people were going to draw water at the busy, rush hour.
Yeah, so that's kind of all deleted.
Yeah, it's a very good point. When Abram's servant Eliezer heard these words, he bowed himself to the ground before the Lord, and the servant brought out jewelry of silver and gold, the garments, and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave to her brother. When I went, Natalie, my wife, and I met 29 years ago yesterday. And when I first went to meet her father, who was a colonel in the Russian army, didn't speak a word of English, and I'm very old-fashioned, and I was, by the way, this is a long story, the coldest I've ever been in my life is a Kiev train platform in January in Gap khaki pants when it was like -20 and windy and all my luggage was gone, and I will never forget that. But I had all my luggage was going to have the wedding ring to propose to her. We had dated a year before that, and passport and ID, and a bottle of Maker's Mark bourbon, because you could not get that in Russia at the time. And so I was smart enough and old-fashioned enough, I wanted to get her father and mother's permission, I already had her mother's, and blessing upon this marriage. And so I met her father and then put out the Maker's Mark. Zdorovo, great. Takes that, he's good. And I was like, I think I just got his blessing, and all it took was like $15. Now, was it just the Maker's Mark? No, but it's a sign of respect to the whole family, because really it's not just two people, it's two families reuniting. Or they're already related, as Sandra pointed out, but they're reconnecting in a stronger bond even than before. And so that's what's happening here. He also gave to her brother and to her mother. You always want to make the mom happy. Costly ornaments. Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank, and they spent the night there. When they rose in the morning, send me back to my master. Her brother and mother said, let the girl remain with us for a while, at least 10 days, and then she may go. Well, why? Who's talked? Just to make sure. We're never going to see her again. That's most likely. Maybe he's got some more presents in the camel bag, for all we know. Maybe. But mostly, we're never going to see her again. We want to say goodbye. But he said, "Do not delay me, since the Lord has made my journey successful. Let me go, that I may go to my master." They said, "We will call the girl and ask her." Oh, finally she gets some say in who's going to marry. However, does Isaac get any say in this? No. I'm going to go pick your wife and you're going to like it. And I don't care if you don't like it. This is what's happening. Rebekah gets a say. Isaac doesn't get a say. "Will you go with this man?" She said, "I will." So they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse along with Abram's servant and his men. So her nurse went with her. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "May you, our sister, become thousands of myriads. May your offspring gain possession of the gates of their foes." Then Rebekah and her maids, so went from one nurse to maids, not clear, mounted the camels, followed the man. Thus the servant took Rebekah and went his way. In scene 3, and then scene 4, the last one. And I'll point out, tell me if you notice something, because it's the first time in the Bible that it occurs. It's right here. "Now Isaac had come from Beer Lahai Roi and was settled in the Negev," the desert. "Isaac went out in the evening to walk in the field, and looking up, he saw camels coming." Think of this as a movie scene. Well, Dad's getting older, and I got to take over the ranch, riding out at night. And I know my servant went out, and here comes the group of camels back. What's she going to look like? Is she ugly? Is she beautiful? Is she kind? Is she rude or whatever? And looking up, he saw camels coming. And Rebekah looked up, and their eyes met at the distance. It doesn't say that, but that's it. And Rebekah looked up, and when she saw Isaac, she slipped quickly from the camel and said to that servant, "Who is that man over there?" Like, they're out in a field. There's one guy out there. "Who is that? Ask him if he likes me." It feels very middle school to me. "Walking in the field to meet us." The servant said, "It is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. Why? Modesty. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. He took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Rabbi Bisno points out something I'd be really curious, a psychiatrist's opinion on this. His mother just died. Then he gets a wife, takes her into his mother's tent, and loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. He just wrote, "Paging Dr. Freud." That was his comment on that. Which is, it's a little weird. Did you catch the first time it happens in the Bible? It's very subtle. He loved her. And this is the first time, just not like parent-son or parent-child or sibling. This is two people who love each other. Not a sister. Abraham and Sarah loved each other, I guess, but this is clear that they want to be together. So the concept enters the biblical canon for the first time. Any questions on all that, Michael?
Yeah, as the story goes on, it's not only Isaac who was comforted after his mother's death, Abraham was comforted and he remarried.
That's right.
And I would say that the significant line here is the one at the end of the penultimate paragraph. May your offspring gain possession of the gates of their foes.
Yeah.
This is explaining why only Isaac's descendants have a claim to the promised land. Promised land is a deeply problematical concept. Abraham has temporized with the Canaanites. He's worshipped trees. He's had pacts with them. He's been granted the Holy Sepulchre. And now he is complaining about the way they treated him, so that in the future he
That's all. I won't argue with any of that.
We ought to be worrying about a great deal more in the context of what's going on in the Holy Land
Yep.
today.
Good point. Huh?
In the Middle East, they still carry out this tradition for the weddings. In fact, if the groom is from another country and isn't present in the bride's country, they'll dress the bride up in a wedding gown, put her on the plane, and she'll get off and meet her groom.
Hmm.
And then they'll go directly and become married. With this set up sometimes over the phone before computers, and now they can Zoom it if the families don't want to go to do it.
Fascinating. Yeah. Let me point a great point. So, traditions in the Middle East about families meeting each other, but specifically about asking the bride, does she really want to meet, or do you really want to marry him? She gets a say. Rebekah had that, but let me point out something which I find quite fascinating. In addition to the love, Rebekah becomes the archetypal spouse in the Bible. She's strong. She can carry many jugs of water. She's kind. She's hospitable. She's beautiful. Hot is the word Margaret just used, yes. She's clearly has agency and determination, but something that is not obvious, who is more like Abraham, Isaac, or Rebekah? Who leaves her country and her kinspeople to go to a new promised land, to be faithful, to continue God's hesed, steadfast love? It's Rebekah, not Isaac. Isaac just does what he's told. She's invited, this is all God's plan, of course. She's invited and she chooses to go just like Abraham did that. It's a quite fascinating point that's not really talked about so much. Allison's saying girls had to get married. I think in that context, everybody had to get married. But she had more say in it than he did, as it turns out, which is obviously not always the case. Anything else? Marianne?
Several times you mentioned the name of the servant, but it's never in.
It's never mentioned here. Elsewhere in Genesis, it mentions Abraham's most trusted servant being Eliezer of Damascus.
So I was wondering whether it was typical not to name the servant or, how you knew, how we know it.
Yeah. I would have just called him the servant, but Aaron Bisno said that we traditionally call him Eliezer in this story. Yeah, great question. So you notice the themes that came out there. There's blessing from and to God that happens over and over. I praise you, most God of heaven. There is this theme of prosperity as a sign of God's blessing. There is the hesed, steadfast loyalty, love, fidelity that God always has. And then you see the people trying to participate in that. Rebekah would be the best example in their own way. And then this very subtle thing that where is God in this whole story? Ever present, directly intervening in any way.
And his will is obvious, seemingly.
Is it obvious?
That everybody goes along with what the plan is.
So I will say, this is a great example of theological reflection. Meaning, when we're going through life at the time, we often have no idea what's happening. Why do I feel so alone, alienated? And it is only later, you almost never see God in the future. It's very difficult to feel God present, active in some way, particularly if you're going through something difficult. And it's later, in retrospect, theological reflection, I see That's how I was being led. And this, by the way, is the first time and the only time in Genesis, first time in the Bible, that the word led, this particular version of it, is used. It's used many places in the Psalms, mostly like the servant was led there. Rebekah was led back. He leadeth me beside still waters, leadeth me not into temptation. Same verb in Psalm 23. This God is leading, drawing, pulling, beckoning, might even be a better word, rather than, okay, Clint, you go here and do this thing exactly this way. It's more subtle than that.
Eleazar is constantly asking, is this the right one? Is this the right one?
And what's the response by God? He seems reassured. That's theological reflection to say there's no coincidence. I got to go. I have a baptism in 5 minutes.